session of our second day of arts readings. And my name is Nikolai Yordanov. I'm a professor at the Institute of Art Studies, Theater Department. And I have the honor and the obligation to be a moderator of this session. We have several panelists today. One of them, Anna Stoyanska from North Macedonia, she will not participate, but we have also another colleague from Istanbul, Başak Şamoglu, who will join us via internet. Let me explain why we are a little bit late. We had problems with YouTube, with the censorship in YouTube, because of the naked body at the cover of the program. But our colleague Kamen, he made everything possible to listen to Başak Şamoglu. And let us begin. We have today one colleague, a doctoral student from our institute at theater department, and 4 colleagues from Slovakia. And let me give the floor to Maria Panayotova. She finished National Academy as an actress and as a stage director, but she's now here a doctoral student. So. Okay, just a moment. Sorry. We shall. Well, 1 minute, because we have no projection now, but we shall have. We need half a minute, maybe. Excellent. No. Yes. Maybe it's better.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carmen.
The question of whether God is present or absent goes beyond any specific time or place. It matters not only because it is a metaphysical question, but because it is deeply connected to the way human civilization develops. We might think of the idea of the divine as something fundamentally human, a way in which we try to make sense of our existence. In this sense, the idea of God unfolds within the inner space of the human psyche and the emotional life, shaped by our need for meaning, order, and transcendence. It is not only a metaphysical construct, but also a deeply internalized experience through which the individual negotiates questions of existence, identity, and purpose. Also, the idea of God evolves in parallel with the development of human civilization. Thus, the dimension of time remains inseparable from any understanding of the divine. In this sense, God and the human being may be conceived as a dialectical pair in which the notion of one inevitably shapes the notion of the other. If we go back to what is often called the cognitive revolution, we see a crucial shift. Humans begin to speak about things that that are not physically present. This is more than storytelling. It is the ability to create shared symbolic realities. And it is precisely these shared imaginary spaces that allow communities to form and function. Within this process, faith, especially faith in the divine, plays a central role. It helps regulate behavior, creates systems of meaning, and supports the development of culture. This paper does not try to answer whether God exists. Instead, it follows how the idea of God changes over time by looking at the development of theater as a cultural practice. Theater is particularly revealing here because it is deeply connected to social processes. It grows out of the human impulse to play, to perform, and to engage with what lies beyond the visible world. By tracing the idea of God through theater, we can better understand how societies construct meaning, how they imagine their realities, and ultimately where we stand today in our spiritual and civilizational development. In this sense, the present paper focuses on the Western cultural tradition, as it is here that one can most clearly trace the trajectory from a theocentric to anthropocentric worldview, culminating in the crisis of the divine in modernity and postmodernity. Because the concept of the divine is broad and abstract, the study approaches it through the development of dramaturgy, which provides clearer historical and aesthetic boundaries. In The Birth of Tragedy, Friedrich Nietzsche interprets the Olympian pantheon not as a transcendent reality, but as a human necessity, in an aesthetic response to the difficulty of existence in which the gods mirror human contradictions and function as projections that render suffering intelligible. With the emergence of myth arises the need to communicate with higher powers, and ritual becomes a mediator between the human and the divine, as seen in ancient Greek practices, especially those dedicated to Dionysius, where the dithyramb lays the foundation of the Greek tragedy, as noted by Aristotle. When ancient drama emerges, it becomes integrated into civic life. At this stage, theater functions within religious and social practice, with the divine as a central organizing principle, shaping moral consciousness and staging the tension between fate and human action. Within tragedy, a gradual transformation of the divine becomes evident. In Aeschylus, divine law dominates. In Sophocles, there is a shift to individual responsibility. And in Euripides, this order is destabilized through the concept of chance. In the Roman tradition, Seneca further transforms the divine into an ethical idea. Thus, divine intervention gradually recedes, yielding to human agency and moral choice. This process leads into medieval drama, where the divine is recognized around the Christian God and the doctrine of salvation. Pagan polytheism is replaced by the Holy Trinity, and theater becomes part of church practice, initially within the liturgy and later as independent forms such as mystery, miracle, and morality plays. In this context, the divine is imposed as absolute truth and a supreme law, articulated through the doctrine of monotheism, while theater functions as a means of instruction and social regulation. The transition to Renaissance theater is marked by the gradual secularization of performance and its movement into urban and courtly spaces. This shift reflects the rise of humanism and the emergence of an anthropocentric world. The focus turns to the human being as an active agent capable of shaping their own destiny. At the same time, political power is reimagined, with the ruler often perceived as a quasi-divine figure. Dramaturgy responds by reworking classical myths and redefining the relationship between man and God. Ancient narratives are transformed within new contexts. Orestes becomes Hamlet, while playwrights such as Christopher Marlowe explore the human desire to exceed natural limits, as in Dr. Faustus. Theater thus becomes a space where human ambition knowledge, and will are set in tension with the divine order that is no longer absolute but increasingly open to question. In the 17th century, classicism marks a decisive stage in the transformation of the divine under the influence of reason. While the divine does not disappear, it becomes mediated through moral and aesthetic structures as theater shifts toward human-centered conflict. In Phaedra, for example, by Jean Racine, passion dominates the individual, while in Tartuffe by Molière, religious authority is openly critiqued. Later, in the Enlightenment, this shift deepens as the human being emerges as a rational and autonomous subject, shaped by the philosophy of René Descartes and other thinkers. The divine retreats into abstraction and meaning is constructed through human reason. This is further reflected in Nathan the Wise by Lessing, where religious truth is presented as relative and grounded in human ethics. Romanticism reacts against this rationalism by recentering the emotional and rebellious individual, while the divine becomes internalized or sought in nature and imagination. This tension is powerfully expressed in Faust by Goethe, where the figure of Faust appears as a recurring cultural topos. The described trajectory leads into early modernity, where Enlightenment optimism is unsettled by scientific and technological change, and theater begins to question established systems of meaning, including the role of the divine. Innovations such as electricity and cinema not only transform everyday life, but also reshape perceptions of time, space, and reality. Within this context, theater undergoes a profound rethinking as established systems of meaning, including the role of the divine, begin to disintegrate. In the second half of the 19th century, this shift becomes particularly pronounced. Under the influence of Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Nietzsche, the idea of God as a guarantor of meaning is increasingly called into question. Theater responds by turning to the human being as shaped by natural, social, and psychological forces, a tendency further deepened by Sigmund Freud's theory of the unconscious. In the early 20th century, the crisis intensifies in the aftermath of the First World War and the collapse of traditional values. The theatrical avant-garde responds by rejecting established forms and experimenting with anti-dramatic structures, thereby foregrounding the breakdown of meaning. In this context, the divine no longer appears as a stable center, but as an absent or compromised principle. Theater thus prepares the ground for the drama of the absurd, where the crisis reaches its most radical expression. Under the influence of the existential philosophy, the drama of the absurd marks the culmination of the collapse of the divine as an organizing principle of the world, where the absence of God becomes an existential fact. As Martin Esslin argues, this theater expresses the condition of the human being confronted with a world without meaning, logic, or transcendent order. The world is no longer a cosmic harmony but chaos. Human existence becomes accidental and unintelligible, while dramatic form itself reflects this collapse through the destruction of logic and the denial of stable identity. Human beings are thrown into existence without support, compelled to construct meaning under conditions that render meaning impossible. In Beckett, Ionesco, and Genet, the absence of the divine leads to the breakdown of moral and cosmological order, replaced by cyclicality, stasis, and existential deadlock. The absurd does not simply deny God, it reveals a world in which the very idea of the metaphysical has been compromised, leaving the human being at once free and abandoned, the master of his own existence in radically alien world. Postmodern theater represents a radical continuation of the process initiated by the absurd. Not only is God absent, but the very possibility of unified meaning and truth collapses. If absurdism confronts the human being with a silent, indifferent cosmos, postmodernity situates them within a field of competing, fragmented, and unstable realities. In dramatic terms, this results in the disintegration of classical structure. Plot becomes episodic or collage-like, characters dissolve into voices or functions, and action gives way to emotional and psychological states. Under the influence of media and technology, theater reflects an increasingly fragmented perception of reality. In Hamlet Machine by Müller, the story of Hamlet collapses into one stream of thought. In Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, we see how the unified narrative of Hamlet is fragmented through the experience of two of its most secondary characters. Fragmentation and collage generate a condition of uncertainty and alienation, yet in contrast to the absurd, postmodern theater repositions the human being, no longer merely abandoned. They assume the role of producer of meaning, if only by chance and often ironically. In the works of Harold Pinter, characters often construct their own moral systems, which frequently stand in opposition to Judeo-Christian paradigm. In those of Matei Vishniak, characters assume a quasi-divine position, taking responsibility for the lives of others. From the perspective of hyper-modern age, the present is not simply defined by the absence of God, but by an emerging competition with the divine. If across theater history, the divine gradually recedes from active force to silent absence, today this trajectory culminates in a reversal. The human being assumes the role of creator. This is evident in works such as Number by Kirill Churchill, Override by Stacey Gregg, and Daneda by Jennifer Haley, where identity, consciousness, and technological mediation compromise the boundaries of human condition. This may be understood as an inversion of the biblical formula of creation in the image and likeness. If the human being was created in the image of God, then in the 21st century, the human being creates artificial intelligence in his own image, systems that imitate thought, language, creativity, and even emotional response. Okay.
Okay.
Last
you
paragraph.
have to finish it.
This is not merely technological progress, but a profound ontological shift in which the act of creation moves from the transcendent to the human. Contemporary dramaturgy reflects this by reformulating classical metaphysical questions through new conflict between creator and creation. If the human being can create consciousness, what distinguishes him from God? Does he bear responsibility towards his creation? Can created consciousness question its creator just as the human being questions God? In this context, tragedy no longer arises from the divine order or its absence, but from the paradox of human self-deification. The contemporary human thus stands before their own creation without the ethical or metaphysical horizon required to sustain it, an encounter that redefines tragedy at the threshold between the human and the post-human.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So I shall follow the list. Now we shall turn the focus to the Slovak drama and stage. The first speaker is Peter Himic from Academy of Arts in Banska Bystrica. So the floor is yours. The title is of his paper is Historical Fact as Information about the Present, Temporality in Slovak Drama.
Thank you. So, with its inherent drama, historical material provides a rich source of inspiration for theatrical works. The significance of major historical events typically resonates with audiences and leaves ethical, ideological, and political imprints on society. The incorporation of historical facts into theatrical work must be assessed in contrast to literary works across the entire spectrum of the communication pathway: subject, matter, author, dramatic work, production, perception, and reception, of course. At various stages of its development, Slovak theatre has grappled with the historical political interpretations of the historical material it portrays, which have affected it in two areas, dramaturgy and staging practice. The situation after 1989 made it possible to challenge interpretive stereotypes, debate them, and, where appropriate, uncover the ideological and political causes of their emergence. However, even during the era of totalitarian regimes, including in Slovak World War II and communism, creators did not bring the historical events they depicted to the stage without conflict. In many cases, they engage with them, sometimes directly as well indirectly. In several instances, original drama also linked itself with this trend. One of the themes in Slovak drama is the depiction of events from recent Slovak or more distant Slavic and Hungarian history. This also involved the construction of national mythology, which, according to the vision of representatives of the 19th century national revival movement, was to become the foundation of our drama. One of the figures who met the criteria to become a national hero according to romanticized portrayals was Jánosik. He is a historical figure shrouded in legend, a rebel whose artistic portrayals never transcended the framework of pseudo-historical narrative, burdened by layers of mythologization. The Jánosik theme, which is the extension the theme of rebellion, resonated in our dramatic literature, especially during tense historical and political moments. The ideological extraction of universal themes of personal and national freedom allowed creators, both playwrights and directors, to explore this theme in more urgent and timely manner. It must be short. Perhaps the historical event most frequently reinterpreted in Slovak drama was the Slovak National Uprising, 1944. In the early years following World War II, the euphoria over the defeat of fascism led theater as well as literature to address this theme without critical perspectives, without the ambition to historically refine or more deeply reveal the internal processes in which human destinies would be reflected in more dramatically developed and theatrically effective situation. This ideologically determined portrayal of the theme of uprising was most pronounced. It's okay, sorry. Most pronounced after the Communist Coup, 1948. An exception in Leopold Lahola's play Four Corners of the World, which was written on the cusp of the new totalitarian regime. Although the play is set during the uprising, it speaks more to general questions of war and the human attitudes towards it. The character of Fugus Yorick, an artist intellectual who does not take a clear stance of the events of the war, introduced into our drama a type of anti-hero, was contempt for any form of violence, was at odds with the heroic perception of the struggle for freedom. When evaluating the drama of the era, it is essential to keep the political context in mind. The period of World War II had strictly defined interpretive limits, and the communist regime forced the entire society into prescribed molds. Many authors accepted this voluntarily, such as Juraj Spitzer and Lubomir Smrčok in the play Stormy Summer, 1955. It is a typical schematic play featuring a new thematic trait, the treacherous, sorry.
Let me see, sorry. Teachers.
Czechoslovak, sorry,
Yes.
my English is very funny. The treacherous Czechoslovak government in exile and its collaborators. Following the era of communist ideological control after 1989, Slovak drama sought ways to explore themes that could be reinterpreted and presented using contemporary theatrical language. The dominant thematic focus was on figures from our literary and political history. In the first half of the 1990s, this theme was systematically explored by the duo of playwright Karol Horak and director Roman Polák, challenging the prevailing stereotypes in school textbooks. His plays, working dramaturgically, thoughtfully to revitalize the lives of our literature bards and broke free from the constraints of previous historiography. The playwright himself describes them as plays that re-evaluate the bloodlay images of leading nationalists, which the production demystified and humanized the tragic figures. Moreover, the theme of the literary figure in its demythologized realistic form constituted the essential dramaturgical foundation of the production cycle, which stood in opposition to then proclaimed attempt to nationalize and purposefully revise historical memory. After 1989, Slovak society underwent a process of internal differentiation. Efforts to achieve Slovak independence went hand in hand with a new ideologization of historical thank you. It's okay. Horak's play stood in opposition to this construction of national memory and sparked sharp controversies. William Klimáček is a contemporary Slovak playwright, a generation younger than Horak. Interconnections and overlaps, both in terms of genre and theme, form the fertile ground of his plays, which are characterized by a free-flowing treatment of time and the blurring of the line between its real and fictional forms. In the dramatic adaptation of well-known prose work of interval Slovak literature, for example, Janko Jesensky novel Demokrati, the transcendence of the original novel and its semantic contamination by other texts is interesting not only in terms of enrichment through textual connections, but also in terms of their semantic shift, notes philosopher of art Lukáš Šutor. Klimáček exposes the complacent temporality of the petty bourgeois milieu in Slovakia during the second half of the 1930s, which pays no heed to any warnings about the threats of the coming Second World War. Klimáček exploited this fact in the naively optimistic construction of the romantic subplot offered by the novel, contrasting in it with stark reports of the approaching danger through references to contemporary non-fiction texts, particularly newspaper reports. Adds Šutor. Among his other plays, one might mention Mojmír II or The Twilight of the Empire. The text draws on the characters and historical context of the great Moravian Empire to raise more profound and global questions about the relationship between Western and Eastern cultures. This is a specific example of play that, in the spirit of postmodern theater and the playwright's genre preferences, intertextuality connects the interpretatively open system of the oldest Slavic history in our territory with the complexity of the contemporary world, in which objective historical facts becomes a tool for the neo-romantic construction of false patriotism and nationalism. Through temporal interweaving, the playwright speaks to the present. Handling historical facts is a non-manipulative way that, on a new thematic level, anticipates our present. Dramatic time is not uniform, but is fragmented across the entire period of the Great Moravian Empire, and the stories told of it with overlaps into an unspecified present. Notice Serbian Slavistic Ana Žikić. A pertinent example is the controversial installation of the opulent statue of Svetopluk at Bratislava Castle. Žikić perceived this as a heterotopia. That is what Michel Foucault called the artificial creation of memory that lives in its own parallel world outside of reality. Science, the interpretation of historical events, has itself, thanks in part to politicians, drifted outside of reality. The text becomes a heterotopia due to the fragmentation of time, thanks to its heterochronism, thereby taking on a role that real places cannot fulfill. It was a citation from Žikić. Several works have emerged within the genre of plays that grapple with political history and its ideologically driven interpretations. One dramaturgically cohesive example was the so-called civic cycle at Bratislava Arena Theatre, which explored this theme through new texts about controversial figures in 20th century Slovak politics. For example, Tiso, Dr. Gustav Husák, they were our presidents, and Dubček, for example, very famous person. Theater scholar, revisiting our own recent history through theater, thus bore witness to our small histories and raised questions of political and social responsibility. But it also generated new misunderstandings, which, due to the short time gap science the presented events, raised the question of historical distance from the subject and also of historical collective memory, which is problematized by the personal memory of those who authentically lived through that era and later found themselves in the role of theater audiences, noted Elena Nopova. In their creative ideological strategies, Slovak playwrights often either correct or rehabilitate historical facts and events. Slovak plays the issue of temporality as well as that of topos can thus be viewed not only artistically but also hermeneutically. In doing so, this opens up broader horizons for philosophical, aesthetic, and ideological artistic postulation.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
I'm not good in English.
Thanks a lot. No, everything's
It's more
okay.
in pages. It's more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It was limited.
You keep the time?
Yes.
Excellent, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Now we shall have three other speeches from our Slovak colleagues. They are all from the Institute of Theatre and Film Research, Art Research Center, the Slovak Academy of Sciences. And first is the first floor is to Karol Mišović. His paper is Performances of Russian Classical Plays as a reflection of the political situation in Czechoslovakia in the 70s and 80s.
Hello.
Hello.
Mute. Yes, here. Hello, everyone.
Maybe the slideshow.
Yes.
Slideshow is here.
Yes.
And from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. In my paper, I examined the period of normalization in Czechoslovakia, which began in 1968, when 5 Warsaw Pact armies entered the country. Czechoslovakia had been experiencing relatively liberal period in the 60s. After the invasion by foreign armies led by the Soviet Union, political course shifted back toward the east. The Sovietization of society also significantly affected by the theater. Due to time constraints, I will present only 2 productions of Russian classic, which, however, openly criticized the political system during normalization. In history, the Communist Party had been in absolute power in Czechoslovakia since February 1948. Russian classical and Soviet plays became an integral part of the repertoires of Czechoslovakia theater. Yet, this imposed portion of the repertoire, Russian drama often provided production teams with a platform for openly articulating criticism of political system. Between the lines, director wow in unmistakable signals of dissent and resistance to political regime. Through classic plays and sometimes even contemporary ones, they shed light of the state of mind of the citizen. They spoke of the hopelessness, even the absurdity of life during the normalization era. Thus, forced Sovietization turned into a significant advantage for many theaters throughout the country. Through an official and ideologically pure repertoire, creators conveyed a clear message about the country's political mechanism, injustice, and social personal crisis. During the 70s and 80s, the theater was subject to strict ideological censorship. If the directors wanted to draw attention to life shortcomings or directly highlight political injustice, they had to carefully slip the message between the lines. They had to work with allegories, metaphors, and subtext. One of the directors who used the words of the classic to tell the story of contemporary life was the director Lubomír Vajdička. Throughout his career, he worked at the Slovak National Uprising Theatre in Martin, in middle of Slovakia, the National Theatre in Prague, it was capital of Czechoslovakia, and the Slovak National Theatre in Bratislava. He made a clear break with the poetry and glorification of Russian classics. Rather, He points to disillusionment, mental exhaustion, and discrepancy between words and deeds, and the person's sense of being lost within themselves. In the realm of Russian social critical comedy, he achieved success with two plays by Alexander Nikolaevich Ostrovsky. He staged The Forest in Martin and profitable position at Slovak National Theatre. Lubomir Vajdička based the concept of the forest on the contrast between real life and theatricality. The play explores the stark contrast between the philosophies of life of merchants and artists. The merchants here pretend to be decent and virtuous community, but in reality they are just putting on a charade for one another. They live in pretense, lies, and a false illusion. In their quest to achieve their desired objective, whether it be wealth or a suitable marriage partner, they are even willing to commit highly immoral acts. It is precisely they who despise the acting profession. They find it immoral and beneath their respectable social reputation. However, Ostrovsky shows through the plot that it is just the pair of wandering actors, šťastlivcev, the fortunate one, and nešťastlivcev, unfortunate one, who are the only honorable characters in the play. They know exactly when they are playing. On the contrary, the merchants are constantly pretending. The scenography by Juraj Fabry featured a wooden stage within a wall depicting the facade of the house belonging to the miserly landowner Gurmiska. Even the very first visual cue suggests that Vajdička was building the production on the principle of theatre within theatre. From the fly system, a new wall of the house kept descending, each one slightly smaller than and last, until it became a screen for a puppet theatre. The final scenes was performed as a puppet show. Only the actors portraying the pair of actors, šťastlivcem and nešťastlivcev, remained real people. The other actors representing the predatory merchant society performed the final dialogue with marionettes. The actors had shed their costumes and, standing behind a small set in everyday dress, manipulated by hand wooden doubles of their characters. The community around Gurmiska thus took on a form that was unique to it. They, not the wandering actors, came to embody a world of jesters, players, and wooden puppets hemmed in by a paper-mache wall. The real actors remain human. They have not hardened into wood. And so šťastlivcem and nešťastlivcev can leave this panopticon of human baseness and fraudulent wealth entitled. They didn't betray their idols. While they have not become rich and are in fact poorer than before, they can at least depart this hypocritical society with their integrity intact. Through the production, Vajdička openly addressed themes of the honesty in everyday life during the normalization era. By means of deceit and pretense, the honest and unprincipled careerist achieve wealth and social comfort, whereas an honest person can at least be proud of their unstained honor. IIIZK revisit these themes 2 years later at Slovak National Theatre, staging Ostrovsky comedy A Profitable Position. Here, too, he emphasized the urgent theme that one must play theatre in order to achieve career and social advancement. Pretense became a fundamental principle of life. In the production, IIIZK relieved how easily the line between reality and illusion dissolves, exposing the inherent theatricality of life, where the mask becomes the second nature. In this way, he openly directed his critical at the society of the time where careerists, even without meeting professional qualification, secured advantageous position at the expense of experts. Unlike them, such individuals are prepared to become part of the theatricality of social convention. The main character, Jadot, rejects the offered patronage and, unlike those around him, wishes to live only by own talent and hard work. Scenographer Josef Ziller situated the realistic comedy within grand space of the former palace, now likely reprised as a museum, as if to suggest that, despite presenting a story from a distant past, the actors in the period costume are in fact playing a strikingly contemporary comedy. The production made use of the principle of theatricality. The characters become actors without realizing it. They play so many roles and engaged in so much pretense they have lost all contact with reality. Jadot was the only real character. In production, his character echoed Alceste from Molière's comedy The Misanthrope. His refusal to conform led the majority to regret him as a madman and social outcast. In the production, Jadot stood apart not only in his values and principles, but also in the way he was portrayed. He was the only one perform naturally and without affectation. The performance of the other roles through stylization and affectation repeatedly highlighted the fine line between life and pose. They suggest the inevitability of amusing as invisible mask in public or in the presence of an opponent, effectively turning the encounter into the theatrical performance. The example of two productions of Russian classic stage during the normalization demonstrates that even within an official favored dramaturgical sphere, directors were able to express a clear critical view of the moral distortions of the period. Through an artificially ideologically pure dramaturgy, they conveyed a clear critique of the official ideology. Although theatre makers regularly face strict censorship, their work can be described as an open theatre within a closed society. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Now he is also was very strict in time. Thank you for this. And now we shall go to Clara Medunicka. Her paper is The Voice of the Nation on Stage, Slovak opera and its staging forms through the ages.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for inviting me, I really appreciate it. The topic of my today's presentation is the voice of the nation on stage with the focus on Slovak opera. And to be honest with you, this topic did not arise as a construct of my conscious research interest. And it raised up organically from the research of the history of Slovak opera direction and Slovak opera in general. This topic had not yet been named in theatre studies in Slovakia, but had been clearly present in both stage and compositional work in Slovak over the past and during like 100 years. So this article and my presentation is an excerpt from a broader study exploring the thesis that the national identity and consciousness try to define themselves through the opera, both in past and also in the present. The voice of the nation can resound from the stage in many ways. It can depict just the national history or national historical figures. It can be part of staging design, like in form of scenography or costume designs. It can be the focal point of the director's interpretation, and it can also be just expressed directly through the score, like drawing musical themes from national folklore, for example. The concept of definition of the term nation have changed over time, and it can take new meanings and connotations in different academic disciplines or different historical periods. So due to the time limitations of today's presentation, I will focus only for the results and application of my research, but in the publicated study and paper you can find also the theoretical basis of my research. Since the 19th century in Slovakia is the concept of the nation understood through the lens of humanism. The basic pillars of national consciousness became established as language, culture, history, truth, and freedom. In era of globalization, multiculturalism and integration of states into larger political, economical, and cultural entities like European Union, for example. However, contemporary philosophy is increasing, re-evaluating the concept of the nation. We view the nation as a construct that can be reconstructed or deconstructed. Nationality is becoming something fluid, something more abstract. And thereby it is opening space for philosophical questions that are also reflected in art. And it is art that poses the question, is the nation a reality we encounter, or it is a narrative we repeatedly create? Perhaps the most significant work in Slovak opera related to the nation is the Slovak national opera called Krútňava. In abroad it's more known as Katrina, which is the name of the main women character, but in Slovakia it is Krútňava, which we can translate as the whirlpool. Even its premiere clashed sharply with the politically conditioned conception of the term nation prevalent at the time. The order to compose the national opera came to Eugen Suchoň, the composer, from the government commissioner, so it was a political order. After a lengthy search, Suchoň chose Milo Urban's novella Za Vyšný mlynom, which we can translate as Behind the Upper Mill, as the basis for his operatic debut. It was a realistic story set in the Slovak village during 1920s, addressing the topics of guilt, repentance, and forgiveness, in other words, with a very strong humanistic message. It is no coincidence that the work with a humanistic and Christian message appealed not only to a composer with the humanistic and Christian overlook, but also to the cultural philosophy of that time. The commission for the opera came during the Second World War. when humanism, forgiveness, and humanity were sweeping through society as ideals of the new world that would emerge after the war. At the time of ongoing war and simultaneously during the era of the first independent Slovak Republic, it was more than necessary to define the relationship between the state and the nation, what is Slovak and what is national, also in the art. But however, the opera's premiere took place 8 years later in a completely different social, political, and cultural context and situation. The composer could hardly have imagined in the early 1940s that the nation whose voice was to resound in Krutňava had changed significantly in the meantime, and then the message of the entire work would have to adapt to this change. After the communists won the vote in Czechoslovakia in 1949, both the national philosophy and the arts changed. Due to censorship, also Krutňava received a new edited version, which was performed for the next 15 years. It was not until 1965 that the theatre returned to the originally Christian and philosophical message. This is how Krutňava looked at the world premiere, and I have some couple of pictures how it used to be performed. Until 2024, the work was staged as a folk opera featuring traditional costumes or stylized Slavic folk attire. Since Milo Urban's novella is titled Behind the Upper Mill, the set design always depicted a mill in the meadow. Both the set and costume designs often took their colors from the Slovak tricolor, another symbol of the national identity to which the creators of Krutňava subscribed. So this is how it used to be performed. This is in Budapest. Krutňava was often performed also in abroad until 1989. Since that there was nothing in abroad, but yeah, this is in Bratislava, the last performance. But in 2024, however, Suchoň's opera was staged at the National Theatre in Košice by Bulgarian director Vera Nemirova. Her perspective on the Slovak national opera was not burdened by staging traditions or need to take a stance on the question of a nation that was foreign and quite unknown to her. Nemirova found in Krutňava a psychological story that tells of a family tragedy and the love triangle in which all people become victims. Nemirova did not present the work as a showcase of national melodies, costumes, and folk dances, but as a psychological drama set in a small town that is not tied to a specific time or place. Nor would we find the tricolor of the Slovak flag in Nemirova's production. Her visual interpretation of the Slovak National Opera is ashen, cold, mostly in shades of white, cream, and gray. The Slovak National Opera thus received an international staging, devoid of national pathos, folkloric elements, and the opera's quite pathetic, morally triumphant conclusion. Nemirova considered the general final reconciliation as unrealistic. In her production, the murder must be punished, and in unspoken hints, there remains the hope that the child, the main point, the main focus is on him in this production. She hints that after all, this child is born of loving relationship. Maybe it is a huge unspoken mystery of this opera, and she focuses on this. And it was really unbelievable what she did with this opera. So I'm glad that I can present you, Bulgarian director, here, what she did in Slovakia. This is a small video. I don't know if the sound will work, but maybe I will play you in the end of my presentation, so I will continue now. Eugen Suchoň's other second opera, Svetopluk, has also undergone a similar staging revival. This representative opera tells the story of the most famous king of the Great Moravian Empire. The story, which first took shape in operatic version in 1960, has been staged by several directors. Branislav Kriška, the first professional Slovak opera director, directed it repeatedly, interpreting the work at times as a monumental historical epos, which with direction and staging informed by the latest archaeological and historical findings. He saw this opera as a saga of the royal family whose fates and decisions shaped the existence of entire nation for 1,000 years. Kriška approached Svetopluk as a national fresco that tells the story of the Slavs. He always depicted it as a national fresco, as a historical production, historical topic. In 2008, movie director Juraj Jakubisko staged this opera, viewing Svetopluk as the personal confession of a ruler, king, shortly after his death. His soul and mind, just before they definitely leave his recently deceased body, re-evaluate his life decisions. The production was a personal confession of a king who understands his responsibility for the destiny of the nation and knows that there's nothing more that he could do to change the fate of the nation. He asks himself if he could do something more to change the future. And he goes through self-denying, anger, to acceptance and the peace. From a theatrical standpoint, this production was not very successful and received mostly negative reviews. But however, the production remained in the repertoire for a couple of seasons, and this to this day represents one of the most original interpretations of this opera. The most recent production of the opera Svetopluk is the 2024 version, directed by Roman Polak, very leading theatre director in Slovakia. He interpreted the work as a polemic on the future of the nation. Rather than looking back at history, he shifted the plot of the production to the near future. The director introduced the topic of internationalization and opened discussion about where a small nation belongs in a larger economical, political, cultural context and union. Here, the nation is no more a space for sharing values. The nation as a cultural value loses its original meaning. Instead, it depicts the tension in society created by the constant threat of another nation seeking to subjugate ours. Polak has created an image of a nation in a globalized world that is increasingly fading and disappearing from the map. However, not the map of the past, but the map of the future. Polak's Svetopluk spoke of the clash between the old and the new world, of the encounter between tradition and progress of a nation that is no longer perceived as a state or as a territory, but as a memory, as an expectation and symbolic projection of collective identity. Again, video, I will jump over and then play you. In Slovak theatrical practice, the voice of the people manifests itself not only as a historical, philosophical, psychological, folkloric topic, but also as social criticism. Jan Ciker's opera Juraj Janosík was premiered in 1954. Until 2016, this work was staged in Slovakia as an epic ballad about the national hero, with directors over the decades reflecting on the true character of Janosík. He was a bandit who, according to legend, robbed the rich and distributed the stolen wealth to the poor. In 2016, again, Roman Polak staged this work in Banská Bystrica, focusing on bringing to life the timeless issue of society's division into rich and poor. Roman Polak retained the first two scenes in their traditional folk costumed form. The modern adaptation began with the third scene, where the director dressed the early 18th century gentry into the costumes of contemporary young people. The staging and directorial updates clashed with the libretto's language, which was very historical, but the production's message carried a clear, very clear point. Even centuries after Janoschik's death, the nation remains divided. The rich have stayed rich. The poverty has not vanished from the nation. In the production, however, Polak reflects on whether the Slovak nation still has no hero today who would not only point out these problems but also solve them. And his answer, however, offers not very much hope. The heroes of 21st century do not wear a shepherd's staff and traditional costumes, but briefcases and ties. Their actions are clothed in grand public speeches about justice and truth, but society's problems remain unchanged. People continue to suffer, and one pseudo-hero is replaced by another who is no more effective at solving problems than his predecessor. Okay. And just very shortly conclusion, as I have demonstrated through selected examples from Slovak history of presenting Slovak opera production, the voice of the nation has been heard from opera stages in Slovakia for over a century. Since the inception of professional theatre in Slovakia, the nation has sought a means of self-determination and self-presentation through the arts. And from a broader perspective, that includes also drama and the dance theatre, I focus only for the opera. And however, even from what has been mentioned, is remarkable finding emerges. The topic of the nation is just as relevant in the 21st century as it was at the First and Second World War, during the period of socialism or normalization. The difference, however, lies in how the topic of the nation is viewed. In the past, this theme in art reflected society's need for definition, self-determination, and the creation or strengthening of national identity, often linked to political commissions. In the 21st century, the topic of the nation emerges as a socially critical commentary on current state of society. The nation as a concept is gradually expanding. Does art follow current sociological and philosophical trends, or it is natural artistic evaluation based on lived reality? Personally, I incline towards the second option. In era of multiculturalism, an immigration crisis that has been sweeping across Europe for several years, and economic volatility, the need to redefine the nation and its manifestation in art appears to be an urgent necessity. The Slovak opera scene is responding to this need, not systematically or in a structured way, but rather intuitively and sporadically, but with increasing intensity and agility. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I still have just 1 minute, do I have one?
Yes, we are over 3 minutes, but okay, let's.
I have three very short videos about these modern reinterpreted productions. These are just trailers for these productions, but it's for your better imagination how it looked like. This is Krutňava from Vera Nemirova.
Národné divadlo Košice uvádza operu Eugena Suchoňa v hudobnom naštudovaní Petra Valentoviča a v réžii renomovanej európskej režisérky Very Nemirovej. Krútňava.
So it was really not very folkloric, and this interpretation was something really unbelievable. This is Polak Svetopluk from 2024 in Slovak National Theatre.
Opera SND uvádza monumentálnu hudobnú drámu Eugena Suchoňa Svetopluk. Po legendárnom Ondrejovi Malachovskom a Jánovi Galovi sa v titulnej úlohe predstavia špičkoví solisti Jozef Venci a Peter Mikuláš. Zažite silný príbeh našich dejín v strhujúcej réžii Romana Poláka 23. a 25. mája. Vstupenky v pokladnici alebo...
And the last one, also short. This is Polák's Janošík in Banská Bystrica.
Dramaturgia Banskobystrickej štátnej opery opäť zaradila do svojho repertoáru dielo Jána Cikera, tentoraz národnú operu Juro Jánošík. Dielo vychádzajúce z ľudových tradícií a historických prameňov sa aktuálne prihovára aj súčasnej dobe. Opera Juro Jánošík v réžii Romana Poláka a v hudobnom naštudovaní Mariána Vacha od 5. marca na javisku štátnej opery v Banskej Bystrici. Mediálni partneri.
Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Clara. So, we are moving to the next speaker. It's Michaela Mojžíšová, and her paper is Biblical Heroes from Baroque Operas and Oratorios through the perspective of 21st century theater.
So, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, the Bible serves as an eternal thematic source for the arts, as the dramatic narratives and protagonists within it carry timeless archetypal patterns. However, its artistic interpretations are subject to time, reflecting the philosophical, ideological, and aesthetic preferences of the eras in which they were created. In my contribution, dedicated to modern directorial interpretations of Baroque oratorios and operas based on Holy Scripture, I examine how contemporary creators interpret the causes and consequences of the actions of biblical figures. The present example of recent European production is linked by a significant trait. The religious dimension is suppressed, and the stories are presented to secular. Okay.
Maybe closer to the mic.
Yes, and where is the how to the next ne? Som na šipke. Okay. No. So I will begin, figuratively speaking, from Adam, with the Paris production of Alessandro Scarlatti's oratorio Cain over il primo omicidio, Cain or the first homicide, directed by Italian theatre maker Romeo Castellucci, in whose work religious and biblical themes hold a prominent place. The story of Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, is among the most difficult Old Testament texts to interpret. The fratricide, following God's acceptance of the shepherd Abel's sacrifice, while disregarding the sacrifice of his brother, the farmer Cain, has always raised questions. According to theological argument, while God's will is difficult to comprehend, but it always seeks a human good. Thus, if God chose only Abel's sacrifice, it did not mean he lacked good intentions for Cain. However, Cain did not accept God's decision and sought to obtain a blessing at any cost. Castellucci's production, however, opposed religious interpretations. The stage presence of Scarlatti's allegorical character, the voice of God, was closer to ancient Greek conception than a Judeo-Christian one. In Castellucci's vision, he was capricious and cruel.
He first left Cain at the mercy of the whispering of the allegorical voice of the devil, and that not only rejected his burnt offering, but smothered it directly with its coat. As in all his works, Castellucci drew on references to the visual arts and modern philosophy, specifically Italian philosopher and aesthetician Giorgio Agamben's theory of the infancy of events forgotten in tradition. After the murder of Abel, the adult protagonist moved into the orchestra pit to sing their parts, while their child alter egos acted out the story on stage. Cain's murder could thus be perceived as a regressive act committed out of infantile selfish motives. It returned humanity to a stage of immaturity and distanced it from God, who created the first man as his partner. The fact that the representative of the voice of God was also given a child form could be read in the sense of director's iconoclastic stance as a regression of the creator himself, who caused this situation through his own decision. Iconoclasm is a term frequently used in reflections of Romeo Castellucci's work. It can also be applied to the production La Passione, a stage meditation on Johann Sebastian Bach's Oratorio Matthäus Passion. In Castellucci's production, the figure of Jesus Christ and other characters from the Passions were completely absent. In a conceptually visual installation, Castellucci presented 18 enacted scenes, or rather images, from the present day, outwardly unrelated to the biblical story. Verbal description of the secular events and phenomena to which the scenes referred were projected onto the hall's wall. The audience was thus challenged to connect everything seen, heard, and read into their own interpretation of the Passions. We can also find an original approach to the Christological theme in the work of German director Klaus Guth, for whom Baroque oratorios and biblical heroes hold a significant place. The first contribution to this dramaturgical program was the production of Handel's most famous oratorio Messiah at the Theater an der Wien. Its abstract libretto is conceived as a commentary on Jesus' birth, passion, resurrection, and ascension. Klaus Guth did not stage the story of the Messiah. Instead, he created an entirely new narrative. It began at the funeral of a man who had committed suicide and subsequently unfolded as a retrospective of the family relationship drama that led to it. Themes of marital infidelity, guilt, professional failure, and the gradual loss of life's meaning were explored. The director replaced the theological level of Messiah with the existential experiences of protagonists seeking redemption in the earthly. A consistently secular and the director's own words, phenomenological interpretation was given by Klaus Guth to Handel's Old Testament oratorio Saul. The point of this production could be summarized by the sentence, "The old passes away, the new arrives." That is the natural law of both individual and social existence. The oratorio's libretto tells the story of King Saul of Israel, the first secular ruler requested from the prophet Samuel by the Hebrew people. In Handel's work, we find Saul already as the king who united the 12 tribes of Israel, built an empire, and defeated its enemies, while also being a father who rules his two daughters and son with a firm hand. However, his era is coming to an end, and he is to be replaced by David, a simple young shepherd who defeated the giant Goliath. In the prologue of Guth's production, an aging, tired man sat in a white-tiled washroom, writing the name Saul on the wall with dust from the floor. Subsequently, the story unfolded retrospectively with psychological, nuanced characters. Following the arrival of David, who penetrated the social elite like a creeping virus, Saul's family gradually fell apart. Both sister and the brother erotically desired the young intruder of order, while Saul was consumed by jealousy and fear of David's growing. The social implication of the family drama surfaced in good, concluding cynic epilogue. After his enthronement, David appeared as if struck by lightning. He wreathed in the same fit of migraine as Saul in the prologue, and stripped of the spear, the insignia of power snatched from his hands by a treacherous priest, he stumbled into the washroom. There, with dust from the ground, he wrote the name David on the white tiles. The circle closed, but definitely only within this story, the power-drunk world turns on, generating new Sauls and Davids. Good's fascination with biblical heroes also stood behind the production of a work that previously existed in music history only as mysterious chimera, the lost opera Samson, composed by French Baroque composer Jean-Philippe Rameau to a libretto by Voltaire. At the festival Aix-en-Provence, Klaus Good, together with conductor Raphael Pichon, did not attempt to reconstruct the unreconstructible. The director used Voltaire's libretto as a script and adapted it textually for the actual musical numbers, which the conductor selected from other Rameau's operas and ballets. At the dramatically justified moments, they were disrupted by modern electronical soundtracks. In this way, the creators resurrected the spirit of the music while refusing to be bound by museum-like piety. Samson, the longed-for son of a barren mother, received superhuman strength from God, and with it the mission to liberate the Israelites from the Philistines. In his interpretation, Klaus Good exposed the controversial nature of Samson's personality, which the Old Testament does not explicitly name. The strongman's outbursts of aggressive anger wounded those who loved him. His superhuman strength isolated him. Alongside the external enemy, he fought internal demons. A controversial moment in Good's interpretation was the search for association between characters incomparable in both meaning and nature, Samson and Jesus Christ. For example, Delilah's betrayal was framed as Judas-like betrayal. As a reward, a Philistine priest pours pearls of money between her legs. The final act of restored strength, the destruction of the Philistine temple, was performed by Samson using a wooden beam evoking the cross, which the Philistines had loaded onto his shoulders. Conversely, a powerful moment was the unfolding of the story from the retrospective perspective of Samson's mother. It was a newly composed speaking role, who loves her son but does not understand his actions. This created an archetypal thread connecting suffering women across far more than just biblical history. Conclusion: biblical oratorios, with their moral paradigm, dramatic narratives, and often controversial heroes, represent immensely rewarding material for contemporary opera. Baroque music is built upon affects, which modern directors approach by asking, where in today's world do we experience such extreme emotion? They contrast the sublime musical component with harsh visual, creating a tension that compels the audience to perceive the Bible as a contemporary rather than a historical text. In the 21st century, the Baroque hero is no longer representative of religious principles, but a tool for examining politics, power, family dramas, or mental illness. Myths and archetypal patterns, which win through human history as prototypes, of human behavior and models of characters and personalities come to life within the experience of the contemporary individual and their understanding of the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Michaela. We shall try our best to have via internet. Maybe Carmen should help us with this. Carmen? We are waiting our colleague from Istanbul, Başak Şamloglu. Her paper is on the topic, the sense of presence, rethinking the actor's time through Ziaves, Ma, the concept of Ma. But let us wait a little bit. Without video. If you hear us, Mr. Shamoglu, please push the button for the mic, for your microphone. We are crossing fingers.
Can you hear my voice now?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Thank you.
Hello from Sofia.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see my view too?
We are hearing you. We don't see you. Okay, now it's okay. Everything. Okay, thank you for joining us. You have your 15 minutes and please read your paper.
Okay, I will add my presentation if you let me one moment. Nasıl yapıyorduk? I have a problem. One moment. Sorry. I think I have to share my screen with you.
Yes. Maybe it will be better if you share the entire screen, not just the window.
Then you cannot see me, but you can see my
presentation. Okay.
Okay, then I will open it and let me share it with you.
Do you have a screen share button next to the camera button in the bottom?
Yes, I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
It needs a little. Okay, select the top window, entire screen, or choose tab. Okay, Entire screen then. It's not working. I don't understand.
Just, now the entire screen, you have to click on the image, and then the share button will be active.
I did it, but I think it needs a rebuild. Can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Actually, I did send my PowerPoint to the to Professor. If you want, you can share it, and I can just show my face to you. I couldn't manage it.
Okay, just let me ask.
No, we have now your presentation. Maybe if there is a problem, technical problem, you could read simply your paper. Maybe you have to read.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I have to open and try to reopen the Chrome section, so it will take so much time.
If you click on the share screen button.
Yes, I did that.
And another window pops up.
Yes.
And you have entire screen on the right.
Okay, I did it too.
Yeah, and you have to click on the image on the rectangle. First on the rectangle, and then the share button will become active.
Yes, I did it too, but it doesn't working because of some problems about Mac. I think Apple this is.
Okay.
So I'm sorry about it.
Okay.
I'm still trying, by the way. No, maybe. No, it doesn't let me.
Only you could only read your paper, please.
I'm sorry, but my paper was beautiful. I wanted to show it.
I'm sure.
Okay, then you see only my face, but okay, let me start, by the way. Good morning, everyone. My name is Başak Şamlıoğlu Huvaj. I'm an actress and researcher based in Istanbul, Turkey, and my work sits at the intersection of performance practice and questions of time and presence on stage. My paper today is called The Scent of Presence, Rethinking the Actor's Time through Zeami's Mom. This paper asks what actor's presence actually requires, what makes it possible, what threatens it today, and what a 15th century Japanese dramaturg concept of mom might teach us about recovering it. We are gathered at a conference called Chronos and Topos. These two coordinates define the traditional frame of theatrical inquiry. How long does the action last, and where does it happen? But I want to suggest that between them, in that very gap, there's a third term this title quietly invites us to consider, which is kairos. You may have noticed the conference image. If you can look to the paper, that the brochure, you can see that it's a detail from Francesco Salviati's 16th century fresco. The conference labeled it simply Kairos, but its full title is The Story of David. Kairos is not the subject, actually, here. He is the figure at the margin, beside a door already passing through, not at the center, not the subject, but the threshold, mid-flight, already leaving there. Because Kairos is not something that you can hold. It happens at the door. It is the moment you either pass through or miss. The Greeks imagined Kairos as an archer's moment, a cylinder spinning on its axis, and a single arrow grew. The arrow passes only when the groove aligns. Too early, too late, and then it's gone. So the archer can only be ready and recognize it when it comes. Felix Omurhada puts it this way: the relation between temporal forms is understood as a crossing over of two ways, the way of Chronos and the way of Kairos. Topos is where the crossing happens, the stage, the threshold, the interval that holds it. Without Chronos, there is no rhythm, and without Kairos, no spark. And the third one is Aio, time not as duration or opportunity, but as suspension, the clock that stops. And what I will argue is that Zeami's Ma is the only structure that can hold all three at once. But first, a word about sense, the name of my paper too. Byung-Chul Han's The Sense of Time proposes that time, when it acquires narrative tension and depth, begins to emit a fragrance, and when atomized, loses it. Not because time moves faster, but because it has lost what Han calls Tiefenspannung. In German, it's in depth tension. The smell of a summer house, for example, does not merely remind us of that summer. It reconstitutes it, makes it present again. That is the sense, not the memory, but now so dense now, it acquires weight, resonance, and meaning. And when time loses its depth, that sense disappears. The sense I'm tracing here is slightly bit different from Hans. Not a sense of a memory, but a sense of a now, a present tense. It's so dense that it leaves a mark before it has even passed. Both require time to have depth. And this depth has a name in Japanese theatrical tradition. Zeami Motoyuka called it ma, not just Zeami, but Zenbuddhism, the structured interval, the gap that breathes. So if Chronos is the quantity of time and topos is the space of the state, what happens in the ma between them? And what does dyschronia do to it? Han has diagnosed our time as dyschronic. The problem is not speed. The problem is atomization. When time loses its narrative tension, its Tiefenspannung, it becomes odorless. On social media, each post is a self-contained event. You laugh at a video and scroll and it's gone. Because in atomized time, the empty interval is not an invitation. It's an anxiety. We feel it, we shorten it, we eliminate it. But there is a second dimension in the disappearing of rituals, hence the other book. Han argues that we are losing not just pace of time, but its habitability. The rituals that we lose render time livable, and they do this through the body, through repetition, shared gesture, what Han calls symbolic perception, the capacity to dwell and find the permanent within the transient. So what replaces this is serial perceptions, extensive, incapable of closure. It rushes from sensation to sensation without ever arriving anywhere. And this is not only a temporal crisis, it's a spatial one. Rituals create thresholds where transformation happens. When the threshold disappears, there is no crossing, only passing. So this is the condition my argument addresses. My argument is brief, is this. Ma, the structured interval at the heart of Zeami's practice, is the only temporal mode that allows the actor to move between Chronos, Kairos, and what Zeami opens towards simultaneously, a depth of presence that neither can reach alone. But first, why I'm talking about Zeami? Why not Grotowski? Why not Stanislavski? Because both were built for a world where the interval could still breathe, and that world is gone, sadly. Acting theory does not evolve linearly, you know. It moves palimpsestically. Each new layer written over the old one, but the old one still legible underneath. Grotowski didn't erase Stanislavski. He carried his traces forward, writing over them with the urgency of his own moments. What I'm proposing is a different kind of movement here, not writing over the old form within the same lineage, but letting an older layer, one from outside this tradition, become legible again, beneath the present crisis. Because both Stanislavski and Grotowski were theorizing presence for audiences whose perceptual world was still intact, communities with resonance and with symbolic perception, with the capacity to linger. The audience arriving today carries a different temporal structure, which means the palimpsest needs a new layer. One can speak to what dyschronia has eroded in the audience as much as in the actors. Stanislavski offers continuity. Chronos, a chain of actions. Grotowski offers intensity, kairos, the explosive now, the spark. But were built for audiences whose perceptual world was still in act. And that world is gone now. These are not criticisms. They are structural limits. Neither can restore a ma. Neither can move between temporal modes. So there is where I turn to Zeami Motoiko, because ma is not simply a concept of his work, it is the living structure through which all three become possible at once. Zeami's work is a vast, decades of secret teachings, a philosophical corpus rooted in Zen Buddhism, a whole way of life, actually. I'm not summarizing it here, don't be afraid. What I'm doing is drawing on three concepts that might help us to restore what dyschronia has eroded, our capacity for symbolic perception. I want to start you by showing you ma before defining it, but I cannot show, but maybe there is a way to make you see it. One moment, please. I have another computer. Thoughts. This is the kanji of ma. If my PowerPoint works, you will see it. It is two gates, and there's a sunlight, this kanji means. And it means actually, together they depict the light passing through the gap between the gates. But notice that the gap is not merely a low light through. It is the reason light can enter its fold. So without the opening of the gate, there is no passage. Ma is translated interval or gap, but it's not an empty space. It's a structured interval, the silence that gives meaning to the sound that follows it. So the stillness between two moments, that is not dead, but alive. Zeami himself says the places where nothing is done are interesting. This is the actor's secret. Kohan says the same for Ritu. The empty interval is the condition of presence. And also some other things. Johakuyo, the rhythmic principle of Zeami's all findings, gives a structure to ma, a slow beginning, a breaking open, and a swift completion that carries within the seed of a new beginning. A pause interrupts the rhythm. Ma is the rhythm's very breath. So through Johakuyo, ma achieves what neither Stanislavski nor Grotowski could. It simultaneously restores the chronos as rhythm, opens a space for kairos to appear, and creates the conditions for a third mode, one that is neither duration nor rapture, but suspension. So, but for the actor to open a ma, to hold that gap, rather to fill it, he needs a particular inner condition. This is what Zeami calls mushin. Mushin is often translated as no mind. Its kanji is here, and it is the state which the actor's self-consciousness dissolves. He stops monitoring ourselves and becomes completely open. Zoridli calls this a second level body-mind awareness. So pre-reflective one, actually. The body thinks, the mind moves. Not a mystical thing, actually, a skill that can be trained. Bergson shows us why. A mind that watches itself cannot be fully present. Mushin is the practice of removing that obstruction. When self-interference ceases, there's Heidegger's Augenblick comes. It becomes possible, like the instant a raindrop meets the water, a moment of total contact before the ripple begins. Past, present, and future collapse into a single authentic now. Augenblick is the event. The quality of time in which it occurs is what I'm calling, not me, the Greeks call it aion. Time not as duration or opportunity, but as suspension. The clock that stops. For example, the child, they deep in play. The audience that looks up and that it's dark outside now. So Zeami precise about this. Move 10 parts of your mind, but 7 parts of your body. The restraint is not the absence, it is the reservoir. So when Mushin and Ma come together, something becomes possible that cannot be planned. Thoroughly gives us the image, the effect we like to see. Only its surface is visible to the audience on the shore. The actor rises like waves, the audience set them in motion, invisible like the pool of the tide. What Han calls the scent of time, that the fragrance of a meaningful now, is precisely this, the invisible force the audience feels but cannot name it. This is what Zeami calls Hana, the flower, not a permanent achievement, but a sudden blossoming that cannot be manufactured or repeated. It can only be made possible by Ma, Johaku, Mushin, and the shared attention of actor and audience as single now. So Ma is spatial. The screen is not a threshold here. You do not cross anything. There is no topos of this transformation, only a wheel here. So descent evaporates before it can reach you. Why stand here at the conclusion? Because presence, like a scent, is intangible. You cannot hold a scent. You cannot measure it, but you know when it is there and you know when it is gone. Pohan tells us that time loses its sense when it loses its depth. Its narrative tension, its capacity for closure, it is habitability. What I have tried to show today is that the stage has always known how to resist this through the deliberate cultivation of interval, of the gap that breathes, of the threshold that holds. And this is exactly what Zeami's practice offers. Not a historical curiosity, but a living lyre in the palimpsest, one written for a world in crisis, waiting to be read again. So now opens a threshold, Joe Hakuyo gives its structure, motion prepares the actor to inhabit it. Before I close, something personal here. For the past 2 seasons, I have been performing a play which I wrote every night on stage that I've been in a work that came out of these questions. And every night when I walk out, what I'm working on is exactly finding the Ma, ongoing. Often, I don't know, sometimes I manage it maybe, but often I don't, I know that. But the trying that precise ongoing negotiation between structure and surrender is that what keeps both here in this research and there on that stage. So in Turkey, and I imagine in many places, acting training is overwhelmingly physical. Theory is tolerated at best. The unspoken assumption is that ideas in the classroom die there. But early in my training, before Grotowski had entered my body through any exercises, I found a copy of Towards a Poor Theater and I read it, almost finished it, and then went to a rehearsal back. But something had changed in me, not in my muscles, in the way I inhabited space. So ideas, sediments, and when practice meets them, they ignite, the gap opens, and something enters. That is what I hope this paper might do today, and I'm not offering a physical method, but open a door. We began today with a gap, sorry about it, and perhaps if we let it breathe, something passed between us. I hope somewhere in this interval, we caught a small orgamblic together. So leave a small gap, let something through. Chronos and topos just name the coordinates, but between them in the map, presence happens. And I know that all me too, need a gap right now to have a break. So let the shine in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to say that although the technical problems, we succeed to show your presentation, so everybody, I think, are lucky here in the room. We lost the time for conversation, for debate, but I'm glad that we succeed to make this connection with Başak Shamloglu. And we heard today very different papers, very different speeches, but in every one of them, there was a thesis that chronos and toposes in drama and theater are strongly dependent from the historical time. And thank you for your participation. We could continue our talks in informal way during the coffee pause. Thank you one more time, and thank you for coming for this connection with Istanbul.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah. Bye-bye and all the best.
Thank you.